My only son skipped his mother's funeral to throw a birthday party for his wife, and then demanded I send him $8,000 to cover the bill. I stood there at my wife's grave, surrounded by friends, but inside I felt more abandoned than ever. For 20 years I had given him everything, love, trust, nearly $1 million, and yet in the moment I needed him most, he chose champagne and music over his own mother's last goodbye. That night, staring at the empty chair across from me, something inside finally broke. They thought I was powerless, just a grieving old man they could drain forever. But they never expected what I decided to do next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I never imagined I'd feel so utterly alone, surrounded by so many people. The day Linda died, something inside me froze, but it wasn't until her funeral, when I stood beside her casket in the chilly morning air of Cedar Rapids, that I realized just how complete my loss truly was. Every detail was as she would have wanted: the gardenias she loved most, the white candles flickering on the altar, her favorite hymn echoing quietly in the background. Friends and neighbors filled the pews. I heard the rustle of black coats, caught snippets of whispered sympathy, and forced a grateful smile through the ache in my chest. Patricia, Linda's sister, hugged me tightly when she arrived. She was trembling, mascara already running down her cheeks. "She was the heart of this family, Alan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Where's Ethan? Is he coming?" I felt the world stop for a moment. I lied. "He's delayed. Work emergency in Chicago. He'll be here soon." My voice sounded distant, rehearsed, nothing like my own. Patricia squeezed my hand, searching my eyes, but let it go. Others asked too. "I haven't seen Ethan in years. He must look so much like you by now. He's traveling back. Traffic's bad," I repeated. With every question, I felt myself shrink a little further inside my suit. Ethan's absence echoed through the room. It was as if there was an empty seat at every table, an extra silence between every prayer. The family photo collage at the front, Linda, Ethan, and me smiling through the years, felt like a cruel joke. I remembered the day we took that Christmas picture, Ethan barely out of college. Linda's arms around us, both her eyes bright with pride. How long had it been since I'd felt that kind of warmth from my own son? The pastor spoke of devotion, of the sacred bonds between husband and wife, parent and child. I listened numb, watching the guests dab at their eyes. My gaze kept drifting to the back of the room, to the door, waiting for it to swing open, for Ethan to rush in, apologizing out of breath, but here, finally, when it mattered. But the door stayed closed. As the service ended, friends filed past me with practiced condolences. "She loved you so deeply. You two built such a beautiful family. Ethan must be devastated." I nodded, smiled, murmured the right words. Inside, I was breaking. What kind of father stands alone at his wife's funeral? After the guests had gone, I stood at the casket for a long time, tracing the wood with my fingers, remembering 40 years of coffee spoons, summer drives, quiet evenings with Linda, reading on the porch. Patricia came to stand beside me. She wiped her eyes and said softly, "He should have been here for you, Alan." For her. I couldn't answer. The truth was too raw. It was then, in that hollow silence, that my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hands shaking. "Ethan." His message was brief. "Sorry, Dad. I can't make it. Today's Jessica's birthday. Hope it goes okay." That was it. I stared at the words as the weight of a lifetime's disappointment settled in my bones. My son had chosen a party over his mother's last goodbye. I stood there frozen while the light outside faded and the flowers began to wilt. The rain was falling steadily as I let myself back into the house that Linda and I had called home for nearly 40 years. Every step echoed in the emptiness. The lights I switched on cast long shadows across the kitchen, but nothing could touch the cold that had settled in my bones. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter, a faint lipstick stain clinging to the rim. I ran my thumb over it, half expecting her to hum behind me, as she always did, filling the room with that gentle, careless music. Instead, there was only silence, dense and impenetrable. I poured myself a cup, sat at the table, and stared at the seat across from me. Her chair, empty now and forever. A stack of photo albums waited on the sideboard, dustier than I remembered. I found myself drawn to them, flipping through the years. Linda, smiling at our wedding, Ethan blowing out his first birthday candles, Christmas mornings crowded with gifts and laughter. There was one photo from the summer. We couldn't afford a real vacation, so we camped in the backyard. Linda's hair was a mess. Ethan had marshmallow all over his face, and I'd never seen them look happier. Pinned to the refrigerator was one of Linda's handwritten notes. "Don't forget to pick up milk and give Ethan a hug for me." She'd always left reminders like that, gentle, loving, practical. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, so I left them exactly where they were, as if moving one word would shatter what little was left of our old life. I sank into the living room recliner, clutching the mug, but the warmth did nothing for the chill inside. On the mantel, Linda's favorite vase caught the faint light, and beside it, a faded birthday card from Ethan. To the best mom in the world, love you forever. I traced the childish scrawl with my finger, remembering how proud she'd been, how she'd kept every note, every card, every scrap he ever gave her. For years she'd believed in him with all her heart. How had we gotten here? Where had I gone wrong? I replayed every choice, every sacrifice, endless hours at work. The vacations missed the money handed over with no questions asked. All to give our son a life better than mine or Linda's. Yet here I was, not only a widower, but something far worse, a father abandoned. I thought losing Linda would be the hardest thing I'd ever face, but that night, sitting alone in our silent house, I realized the ache of losing my son was somehow even deeper. There's a special kind of emptiness when the child you raised becomes a stranger at the moment you need him most. Lightning flashed outside, and for a moment the kitchen was lit up like a stage. My phone buzzed. For a heartbeat, I hoped it was Ethan apologizing for missing the funeral, reaching out in the middle of the night. But when I answered, his tone was brisk, almost impatient. Hey, Dad. Listen, I know things were rough today, but I need a favor. Jessica's party ran a little over budget. Can you send $3,500? Just for now, I'll pay you back. Promise. He didn't ask how I was, didn't mention his mother. Just money, again. I stared at the wall numb. The gulf between us, I realized, had never been wider. The next evening, the house felt even emptier. The silence pressed down harder. When the phone rang again, I answered right away, almost desperate for any sign of warmth or understanding from my son. I needed Ethan to acknowledge what we'd lost. Instead, his voice was drowned out by the thumping of bass and high-pitched laughter. Dad, hey, hold on, can you hear me? The sound of clinking glasses and someone shouting, Happy birthday, Jessica echoed through the line. I tried to raise my voice over the chaos. Ethan, can you step somewhere quiet? I just want to talk. But he cut me off. Yeah, sorry, Dad. It's just a little wild tonight. Jessica's turning 30. You know how it is. She only gets 1/30th right. In the background, Jessica's giggle rang out, crystal clear. Someone cheered. For a moment, I thought he might say something meaningful, something about his mother. Anything. Instead, Ethan lowered his voice slightly. Look, I know things have been tough. But you know Mom? Well, she's not coming back. But Jessica's birthday, that's just once a year, right? We went a little overboard tonight, hired a band, got her this bracelet she's been wanting forever. Even booked the private room at that steakhouse she loves. She deserves it. But you know the tab's climbing. He paused. I waited, hoping for a word of regret, some trace of empathy. Nothing. So, Dad, I was hoping you could spot me $8,000, just to cover tonight. I'll pay you back, I promise. I know you're probably still dealing with, well, everything. But this would really help. Jessica would be so grateful. She says hi, by the way. A cold wave rushed through me. I could barely get the words out. Ethan, your mother's funeral was yesterday. He barely seemed to register it. Yeah, I know, but Mom would want us to be happy, right? Besides, we already talked about this. I can't just bail on Jessica. She'd be crushed. There was another burst of laughter in the background. Jessica's voice rose above the din. Tell your dad I love the earrings. You're the best, Alan. I pressed my hand to my forehead, suddenly exhausted. My son's life, so full of noise and celebration, was utterly separate from the devastation I was living through. I wanted to scream, to beg him to remember who he was, who we all were. But the only thing that came out was a faint, I'll think about it. Ethan didn't notice the strain in my voice. Thanks, Dad. You're the best. Just wire it to the usual account, okay? Oh, and give me a call next week. Gotta run, love you. He hung up before I could reply. I sat there, the empty hum of the dial tone ringing in my ear, feeling more alone than ever. The man I'd raised, the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares, was gone. In his place was someone I barely recognized, someone who saw me as nothing but a wallet and ATM for whatever party came next. For a long time, I sat in the dark phone in my lap, staring at nothing. Then, with trembling hands, I went to the file cabinet in Linda's old office and pulled out the folder labeled Ethan Finances. It was time to face the truth about just how much I'd given and just how much I'd lost. By dawn, sleep was impossible. The house felt colder than ever as I sat hunched at Linda's old desk, a stack of file folders spread before me. A single bulb illuminated the room, throwing sharp shadows onto the ledger paper, bank statements, and receipts that documented a lifetime of sacrifice. I started from the beginning, determined to tally every dollar that had passed from my account into Ethan's back. The numbers were staggering. $60, 0, 0, 0. For 4 years of undergraduate tuition, every semester check, written each bill paid on time. Linda insisting, it's an investment in our son's future. Then the MBA, he never finished, another $55 zero-inch tuition, living expenses, and fees. He dropped out halfway, chasing a new dream, ungrateful. The house. How could I forget? I'd drained our retirement accounts to give Ethan and Jessica their down payment, $420, 000, just so they could have their own place in the city. A home Linda was never quite comfortable visiting. The wedding, Jessica's dream day, cost us $72, 000. Every flower, every seat, every unnecessary flourish. Linda smiled. It's just money, Alan. It will bring them happiness. I nodded, telling myself it was the right thing. But the happiness never seemed to last. Emergency after emergency followed. When Ethan lost his job twice, I covered their mortgage, paid off. Jessica's hospital bills rescued them from foreclosure, totaled $210, 000. I traced the line items, each transaction labeled Urgent Emergency Family, $80, 000. Disappeared into a failed investment. Ethan swore would make us all rich. Then there was the car, his first, then Jessica's, then a replacement after an accident, $38, 000. The rest, vacations, credit card debt, business loans, the little gifts and indulgences, added up every bit of it. All told $935, 000, nearly $1 million gone. For each outflow there was a receipt, sometimes a thank you card, often just a rushed text. Thanks, Dad, you're a lifesaver. I read them all, realizing how hollow those words had become. As I rifled through the folders, a thin blue notebook slipped to the floor. I recognized it immediately, Linda's handwriting, her private thoughts, things she never said aloud. Hands shaking, I opened to a page near the end. If one day Ethan only sees us as a source of money, what will be left of our family? I hope I'm wrong. I pray he remembers our love more than the checks we write. Alan is so generous. I worry we've protected him too much. I sat for a long time reading her words, feeling the full weight of every choice I'd made. I'd given Ethan everything: opportunity, security, even the benefit of the doubt. In my desperate hope to spare him the hardship I'd endured, I'd raised a son who saw family as an endless resource, not a well of love. A cold clarity settled over me. It wasn't just that I'd lost Linda. I'd lost Ethan too, somewhere along the way, surrendered him to entitlement, to selfishness, to Jessica's endless appetite for more. The pain of this realization was like a physical blow, but underneath it was something new, a resolve. Linda's words burned in my mind. If all he sees is money. I closed the notebook and straightened the stack of evidence. Enough. It was time to stop being a victim in my own life. It was time to do what was right, not just for myself, but in memory of the woman who had believed even as she feared. I locked the files in the drawer. I knew what I had to do next. I read Linda's words over and over until the tears came. For so long I'd tried to shield my family from every hardship, believing that love was measured by sacrifice. Now, staring at her gentle warnings inked in blue pen, I realized that I had been as much to blame for our son's sense of entitlement as he was. Grief gave way to something sharper, fiercer anger, not at Ethan, not at Linda, but at myself. It was a bitter kind of awakening. I saw now that my grief had kept me paralyzed, my guilt had kept me silent, and my generosity had been twisted into a trap. If all he sees is money, what will be left of our family? I could almost hear Linda's voice beside me, her hand on my shoulder. She'd always been the strong one. Maybe it was time I finally became strong too. A new clarity took hold. I wiped my eyes and reached for my phone, dialing the number I'd been avoiding for weeks. Robert Chen had been our family lawyer for over 20 years, a man Linda trusted implicitly, a man who knew the difference between anger and justice. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm as ever. Alan, I heard about Linda. I'm so sorry. There was no point in small talk. Robert, I need your advice. I want to remove Ethan from my will. All of it. Everything. There was a pause, then a slow exhale. Alan, that's a serious step. Are you sure? I swallowed hard. I'm sure. He's taken almost $1 million from us. Missed his own mother's funeral for a birthday party. He doesn't see us as family anymore, just a safety net. I can't let it continue, Linda warned me. I just never listened. Robert didn't try to comfort me. He was a good lawyer and an honest friend. You're angry. That's understandable. But don't do anything rash. If you want to proceed, we'll need to update your will, your trust, the power of attorney, everything. Are you prepared for what that means? Yes, I said, and for the first time my voice didn't shake. I need to do this. Not to punish him, but to protect what's left of our family and Linda's legacy. He agreed to meet at his office that afternoon. Bring all the documents, Alan. We'll go through this step by step. Just stay calm. This is about setting things right, not getting revenge. I hung up, feeling the first real surge of determination since Linda died. For too long, I'd been a bystander in my own life, letting guilt and fear make my decisions. No more. Before heading to the law office, I sat for a moment reading Linda's journal one last time. Her words, so gentle, so wise, were no longer just a warning. They were a call to action. I owed it to her and to myself to finally do the hard thing. I won't let him hurt us anymore, I whispered. He won't get another chance. As I locked the drawer, I made a list in my mind. The will, the trusts, the accounts, and next the company. Ethan would find out soon enough that the world was changing. I straightened my tie, grabbed the folder of financial records, and dialed my company's HR manager. I need to talk about my son, I said, voice steady. It's time for some changes. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of day where every decision seemed sharpened by the chill. I arrived at Foster Construction 2 hours early, unable to sleep, my mind running over every conversation, every missed warning sign. The lobby smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee, routine familiar, yet today felt like the end of something much bigger. I walked the halls in silence. On the management wall, Ethan's portrait hung among the other department heads, a young man in a tailored suit smiling confidently at a future he'd never truly earned. I stared at that photo, remembering the day it was taken. How proud I was. How blind. Sarah Mitchell was waiting for me in my office. She was always meticulous, always prepared. Mr. Greene, she greeted me quietly. I have the documents you requested. We sat down across the desk, the file between us thicker than I'd expected. Let's go through it, I said. My voice was calm, strangely so. Sarah opened her report page after page of missed deadlines, unauthorized expenses, and contractor complaints. The most recent $12 0-inch budget overruns for a project Ethan had promised to manage personally. He's been late nearly every week this quarter, Sarah said, her tone clinical but not unkind. Client feedback is poor. We've lost 2 contracts in the last 6 months, both cited Ethan's lack of follow-up. There's also evidence he's been using the company card for personal expenses. She slid statements across the desk. I didn't need to read them. I'd seen enough. For years, I'd made excuses. He's young. He'll learn. It's just a rough patch. But in truth, I'd allowed Ethan to coast-protected him from consequences to the detriment of the company I'd spent my life building. Sarah hesitated. Staff morale is suffering, Alan. People talk. They wonder why he's treated differently. I nodded, shame burning in my gut. You're right. That ends today. I signed the top page. Begin the formal termination process. I want everything by the book. No exceptions. Ethan gets the same treatment as anyone else. Sarah gathered the paperwork, relief visible in her eyes. I'll schedule the meeting for tomorrow. HR will be present and security will escort him out after. Thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry it took me this long. As she left, I sat back and tried to steady my hands. Through the glass, I could see Ethan, just arriving 15 minutes late, laughing with the receptionist, utterly unaware of what was about to happen. I watched him head to the break room, oblivious to the tension in the air, still wearing that entitled grin. I thought of all the times I'd bailed him out, glossed over his mistakes, ignored the quiet resentment in the office. If Ethan had been any other employee, he would have been gone years ago. That ends now. I glanced again at the management wall. Tomorrow, that smiling photograph would come down, and the company would begin to heal. For the first time in years, I felt certain I was doing the right thing, not just for myself, but for everyone who still believed in what Foster Construction stood for. Tomorrow, Ethan would learn what real consequences looked like. The next morning, the atmosphere at Foster Construction was tense, humming with anticipation. Word travels fast in an office like mine, and it was no secret that Ethan had been summoned for an unscheduled meeting first thing. Employees glanced nervously at their monitors, whispers flitting from desk to desk. Everyone knew he was the boss's son, but no one, it seemed, respected him for it. At exactly 8:30, Sarah Mitchell knocked on my door. Ethan is here, she said quietly. I nodded and motioned for her to bring him in, along with our security officer and another manager to serve as witness. Ethan strolled into the room with his usual swagger, a cup of coffee in hand, a lazy smile on his lips. He glanced around, saw Sarah, saw the security guard, and for the first time doubt flickered in his eyes. Dad, what's going on? I didn't waste words. Ethan, please have a seat. My voice was firm and personal. Sarah placed a stack of documents on the table. I slid them toward him. This is a formal termination meeting. Your employment with Foster Construction ends today, effective immediately. You are being let go for cause gross misconduct, violation of company policy, repeated misuse of company funds, and dereliction of your duties. He gaped at me. What, you can't be serious? I'm your son. You can't do this in front of everyone. I felt my jaw tighten. That's exactly why I must. For too long you've relied on your last name as a shield. That ends now. The same rules apply to you as to every other employee. Here are the documented violations: $12,000 unauthorized expenses this year alone, missed deadlines, disregard for procedure, all signed by HR with evidence attached. Sarah's voice was steady, businesslike. We have already deactivated your computer access and security badge. You'll be escorted to your office to collect your personal belongings. Ethan's bravado crumbled. Dad, please. Let's talk privately. I can explain. This is humiliating. Can't we work something out? Think of Mom. She wouldn't want this. My hands didn't tremble. Your mother always believed in accountability. I have to do what's right for the company and for myself. His face flushed red, shifting from shock to anger to desperation. You're ruining my life. You're destroying our family name. No, Ethan. I'm saving what's left of it. Sarah gave a slight nod, signaling the guard. Ethan stared at me, his eyes full of disbelief. I didn't look away. The guard gestured politely but firmly for Ethan to stand. This isn't over, he hissed. You'll regret this. He was marched through the hallways, past the silent desks of his former colleagues. Some looked up. Most did not. Not a single word was spoken. It was a walk of shame, and he knew it. I remained in the conference room, letting the tension bleed away. My heart ached, but I felt no doubt. As soon as he reached the lobby, Ethan pulled out his phone. I watched through the window as he dialed Jessica, his wife frantic, his voice rising with panic. I could see her face on the video call, first concern, then irritation, then a visible, uneasy doubt. Even she was starting to wonder if the life she'd built on Ethan's status was about to crumble. Tomorrow, the whole world would know. And for the first time, I didn't care about appearances. I cared about justice. That evening, the unraveling of Ethan's world picked up speed. I wasn't there to see it firsthand, but later I would piece together the chaos, through the snippets of voicemails, the frantic messages, and the silence that grew between us. Ethan had always believed that money would somehow appear, a safety net woven by my sacrifices, Linda's kindness, and the reputation of our family name. But tonight the net was gone. His credit card, once a magic wand for every whim, was declined at the gas station. The bank app showed an account balance barely above zero. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, one creditor after another, demanding payment, each one less patient than the last. Jessica paced the living room, arms folded, the mail, mostly overdue bills and final notices piling up on the coffee table. She shot Ethan a glare. Why are they calling so much? Didn't you say your dad would help? He tried to keep his voice steady. It's just a glitch. I'll call him, straighten things out. Don't worry. But when he dialed, my answer was short and final. Ethan, I can't do this anymore. You have to handle your own problems now. I've given all I can. He sputtered, anger flaring. Dad, this isn't the time. You know I'm good for it. Jessica's freaking out. You can't just hang me out to dry. I'm sorry, son. This is for your own good. I mean it. He slammed the phone down, red-faced. Jessica whirled on him. You promised me, Ethan. You said you'd always take care of us. What happened to your job? Why is every card maxed out? My birthday is ruined and you're just standing there. He opened his mouth, then closed it, lost for words. The truth was too ugly, too raw. He'd never learned to say no, never learned to stand on his own. The arguments grew louder, circling the same tired questions. Why, how, what now? Desperate to prove himself, Ethan grabbed Jessica's purse and insisted they go out for dinner. Just let me handle it. We deserve one nice thing. At the restaurant, he handed over her platinum credit card with a flourish, only to have the server return apologetic. I'm sorry your card has been declined. Do you have another form of payment? Jessica's face burned with humiliation. That's impossible. Run it again. Still nothing. Heads turned as the server returned a third time. Ethan tried his own card declined. The couple slunk out angry and ashamed. Back home, Jessica tore through the mail, finding the latest letter from the bank. She read it aloud, voice shaking. Your mortgage is 60 days overdue. Total past due $40,000. Foreclosure proceedings will begin if payment is not received within 30 days. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the warning himself. For the first time, he seemed to understand the true scale of what he'd lost. Jessica stared at him, eyes cold and sharp. This isn't just your problem anymore, Ethan. It's mine, too. What are you going to do? The phone rang again, another creditor. This time, Ethan didn't answer. There were no more easy solutions, no more family bailouts. Tomorrow would bring even harsher realities. The collapse of Ethan's world wasn't just financial, it was social, and it was swift. The story of his absence from Linda's funeral, once whispered in corners, became the talk of every club and congregation. Within days, the judgment of the community landed harder than any bill. It began at the country club, a place Ethan once wore like a badge of honor. On Friday evening, he and Jessica arrived for their regular reservation. The hostess avoided eye contact, then stammered, I'm sorry, mister. Greene, your table isn't available tonight. She offered no alternative, just a faint, embarrassed shrug. Around them, heads turned, conversations paused, and then resumed in louder, pointed whispers. That's the one who missed his mother's funeral for a party, someone muttered. Ethan's cheeks burned, but there was nothing to say. At the church that Sunday, the chilly reception was unmistakable. No handshakes, no warm greetings, just cold nods and averted gazes. Even the pastor, who'd known Ethan since he was a boy, skipped over him during the benediction. Jessica tried to chat with the other women, but found herself standing alone by the coffee urn. She overheard one of them say, she used to brag about their vacations, now look at them, money's not everything. The ostracism spread to local shops. At the grocery store, Ethan found people changing aisles to avoid him. Jessica's favorite yoga studio regretfully informed her that her membership had been canceled, citing a wait list. When Jessica protested, the receptionist replied coolly, We value family here. They stopped receiving invitations. The mailbox, once filled with party invites and charity events, delivered only bills and the occasional returned RSVP. Jessica, always quick to post their glamorous lives online, suddenly found her followers dwindling, and then friends began blocking her outright. Even those who'd once vied for a seat at their table now wanted nothing to do with them. The humiliation was relentless. At the boutique where Jessica shopped for years, the owner looked her up and down and said, Perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere. Jessica stormed out, blinking back angry tears, but there was nowhere left to go. Their neighbors, once friendly, now offered tight-lipped smiles, or looked away entirely. Ethan tried reaching out, calling an old friend, leaving a message about grabbing drinks, but got nothing back. He checked his social media only to find he'd been quietly erased from group chats and unfriended by people he'd known since high school. At home, the tension grew. Jessica blamed Ethan for everything, the shame, the cold shoulders, the growing pile of unpaid bills. You promised this would never happen, she snapped one night. You said we'd always be on top. He tried to explain, but every excuse sounded emptier than the last. The sense of isolation was suffocating. Then the final blow arrived, a certified letter from the bank stamped Urge NT. Ethan tore it open with shaking hands. The notice was blunt. Foreclosure proceedings would begin in 30 days, unless the past due mortgage of $40,000 was paid in full. He stared at the paper, the words blurring. All the doors were closing. The friends, the status, the protection he'd taken for granted, gone one after another. Now he was truly alone, and the clock was ticking. The winter air was knife-sharp the morning it all became official. I watched from my parked car across the street engine, idling for warmth, hidden behind fogged glass. I didn't want Ethan to see me, not now. This was his reckoning, a reckoning I'd allowed to happen, and one that I refused to interfere with any longer. The bank's sedan arrived precisely at 9. 2 representatives in navy coats stepped out, their breath pluming in the cold. They carried briefcases and an official clipboard, their faces set in that familiar mask of businesslike sympathy. An officer from the foreclosure department trailed behind, carrying a roll of neon orange foreclosure notices. I saw Ethan open the door before they even knocked, his eyes puffy and rimmed red. Jessica hovered in the background, arms folded tightly around herself, her jaw clenched against both the cold and her anger. The bank representatives were polite but impersonal. One read the formal notification aloud, the words echoing down the icy front steps. Foreclosure has been executed. You have 30 days to vacate the property. An inventory of assets will now be conducted. Jessica's composure broke. This is all your fault, Ethan. You told me your father would never let this happen. You said you had it handled. She slapped his arm with an envelope of unpaid bills, voice rising to a shrill public pitch. Ethan lost, could only stammer, "Jess, please. I'm doing everything I can." I didn't know Dad would. He looked across the street, almost as if he could sense me, but I kept still. I wasn't the lifeline this time. Inside the house, the bankers moved methodically, tagging the furniture, photographing valuables, cataloging every piece of property that could be sold to recover debt. Jessica tried to intervene, snatching a framed wedding photo from a banker's hands. "That's mine. You can't just take our lives away." "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's procedure," came the tired reply. The orange foreclosure notice went up on the front door, garish and final. It fluttered in the wind for all the neighborhood to see. I watched Ethan as he pressed his palm against the glass, staring out at the street with a look I'd never seen before, real fear. Their dream home was stripped of its warmth. Boxes appeared in every room, Jessica packing her designer shoes and handbags with a frantic energy that bordered on rage. "I'm not staying for this. My mother warned me about you, Ethan. She said you were just a spoiled little boy pretending to be a man." Ethan tried to stop her. "Jess, please, we can work this out. We just need time, just a little more time." But Jessica was done. "Number, I'm calling my mother. I'm not living in a house with a foreclosure sticker on the door. You can keep your pride, Ethan, and see where it gets you." He watched her go, suitcase clattering down the front steps as the moving van idled at the curb. A neighbor peered through a curtain, then quickly withdrew. No one came out to help. There was no more pretense of friendship or support. When the bank finished the inventory, Ethan was left standing in the foyer, surrounded by the shell of a life he'd never truly built. The rooms felt bigger, emptier, filled only with echoes of arguments and laughter that now seemed impossibly distant. He tried calling me again that night, desperation thick in his voice. I let it ring. It was only later, when he shuffled through the day's mail, that he found it the official notice for the public auction. The house, his forever home, would be sold on the courthouse steps. In 2 weeks' time, highest bidder takes all. Ethan stared at the paper, fingers trembling. Reality settled in, heavier than any debt. The home he'd once shown off at every party was about to belong to someone else, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. Outside, the snow began to fall, soft and silent, erasing footprints and hiding the evidence of a life that was now unmistakably over. The morning of the auction was colder than any October I could remember. Frost clung to the grass, and a bitter wind cut through the crowd that had gathered on Ethan's front lawn. I stayed at a distance, parked at the end of the block, watching as the last pieces of my son's old life were put up for sale before the world. Ethan and Jessica stood at the edge of the porch, surrounded by boxes and the remains of their dignity. Jessica's face was streaked with mascara, her eyes swollen from a night of tears. Ethan's shoulders were hunched, his suit wrinkled, a far cry from the proud man who once hosted parties in this very yard. Neighbors circled, some openly gawking, others murmuring behind gloved hands. The local bank officer arrived promptly, briefcase in hand, while a court-appointed auctioneer set up a folding table and a battered speaker. I caught sight of Sarah, our old HR director, and now the executive of the Linda Greene Foundation, standing calmly in the crowd, clipboard at her side, eyes clear and unreadable. The auctioneer's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today we are auctioning this property due to foreclosure balance owed $43,500. Opening bid, $43,500. No one looked at Ethan or Jessica, not really. They looked through them as if their presence was just an inconvenient shadow of a family that had already vanished. A contractor from Cedar Rapids raised a hand. 44,000, a flurry of low predatory voices. 45. 46. Each number climbed like the steps of a gallows. Then Sarah's voice, quiet but firm, broke through. 50,000 even. Heads turned surprised. The crowd fell silent. No one matched her. The auctioneer looked around, then down at his list. Any further bids? Going once, going twice, sold to Miss Sarah Mitchell on behalf of the Linda Greene Foundation. Jessica choked on a sob, covering her face. Ethan stood, frozen lips, trembling. Sarah stepped forward, signing the deed with a flourish. The house will be donated to a local charity in honor of Linda Greene. Her voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. The neighbors erupted in quiet whispers, admiration, pity, even a touch of satisfaction. I saw old friends shake their heads. They brought this on themselves, someone muttered. The final humiliation was complete. Ethan surged forward, hands shaking, reaching for the auctioneer. "Wait, please, there must be something I can do. We just need a little more time." My father, he'll help. I know he will. The bank official shook his head. Mr. Greene, it's over. The property is no longer yours. You have 7 days to vacate the premises. Jessica's wails grew louder. She dropped to her knees on the lawn, sobbing uncontrollably, mascara staining the grass. Ethan tried to comfort her, but she pulled away. The last threads of their marriage seemed to unravel in public, each accusation and denial echoing in the frigid air. Sarah caught Ethan's gaze as she prepared to leave. This isn't personal, Ethan. The foundation will help a family in need. Maybe you'll find a way to start over. He stared at her, speechless. As Sarah walked to her car, the crowd began to disperse, neighbors crossing themselves, parents pulling children away from the spectacle. The foreclosure notice on the front door flapped in the wind, a final punctuation mark. Jessica spun on Ethan, voice raw and broken. You did this. You ruined everything. I have nothing because of you. You destroyed our family. You can live with that. Her words cut through the last shreds of Ethan's pride. He slumped onto the porch steps, hands pressed to his face, as the world he'd built on borrowed time and false promises crumbled around him. In my car at the corner, I felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction that justice at last had found its mark. The rain had been falling all day, the kind of steady drizzle that turned the world gray and cold. The apartment Ethan now called home was barely more than a box above a strip mall, thin walls, flickering lights, and the constant hum of traffic outside. Every sound inside echoed the scrape of boxes, the thud of shoes on the cheap linoleum, Jessica's voice hard and brittle. She was packing the last of her things. Her friend waited by the door, arms crossed, tapping her foot. Ethan stood by the window, watching the parking lot below fill with puddles, trying to find words that might make Jessica stay. But she was done searching for kindness in him. She tossed her wedding ring onto the chipped kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore, Ethan, she said flatly. I need a real man. Someone who doesn't just talk and spend, but actually provides. I'm tired of cleaning up your mess. He reached for her, voice desperate. Jess, please. This is just a rough patch. We can start over. I'll get a job. I'll fix this. She laughed, sharp, bitter final. You've been saying that since the day we met. All you ever do is take. You ruined everything. You let your parents down. You let me down. She motioned for her friend to grab the last suitcase. Don't call me. Don't follow me. I'm done. As she walked out the door, her friend glared at Ethan, then shut it hard behind them. The apartment seemed to shrink in the silence that followed. Ethan slumped to the floor, surrounded by boxes, cheap furniture, and reminders of a life that no longer existed. He spotted their wedding photo on the edge of a box. The glass cracked the image of 2 smiling faces, already fading from memory. With a sudden surge of rage, Ethan hurled it against the wall. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room. He slid down, knees to his chest, sobs racking his body for the first time in years. There in the shadows and the rain, he finally allowed himself to grieve, not just for Jessica, but for everything he'd lost: the home, the friends, his mother, the future he'd once imagined. All of it gone, and nothing left to blame but himself. As he sat among the ruins, something on the counter caught the weak light, a band of gold, Jessica's ring, left behind like an accusation. He reached for it with shaking hands, then let it drop to the... He might have sat there all night, lost in the echo of his failures, if not for the phone ringing. The screen lit up, Dad. Ethan hesitated, heart pounding. He wiped his face, trying to steady his voice. For the first time, he realized that there was no one left to call but me. The sky was streaked with autumn gold as I took the elevator to the top floor of Robert Chen's law office. My heart was steady, my mind clear. In my jacket pocket was Linda's last letter, the one she'd written when she knew her days were numbered, telling me to do what was right even if it meant letting go. Robert greeted me at the glass door, his expression warm but professional. He gestured to a spacious conference room, sunlight spilling over polished wood. On the far end of the table, beside a neat stack of documents, someone had placed a framed photo of Linda, her gentle smile reminding me why I was here. 2 staff members entered, carrying witness logs and notary seals. Robert reviewed the paperwork one last time, then slid the first document across the table. Alan, this is the revised will. It transfers all assets, your home investments, and the Foster Family Trust into the Linda Greene Foundation. You'll remain trustee during your lifetime. Upon your passing, everything will fund scholarships, medical grants, and the causes you and Linda cared about. I looked at Linda's picture then, at my own reflection in the window. For years, I'd believed that sacrifice and love would be enough to save my family from the rot of entitlement. I'd been wrong. This was my chance to set things right. I signed each page in silence, the weight of every stroke both a burden and a liberation. The room was quiet except for the scratch of pens and the gentle clearing of a witness's throat. Robert paused after the last signature. You're sure, Alan, this is final? Ethan will be completely disinherited. There's no turning back. I nodded. I've thought about this for months. I loved my son enough to give him every chance. He threw each one away. It's time to give someone else a chance. Someone who'll make Linda proud. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. We'll move the insurance policies, the investment accounts, everything into the foundation's name. Ethan will receive a legal notice within the week. I folded Linda's letter and placed it beside the will. She always wanted our life to mean something. Not just comfort, but purpose. I choose to honor her now, not my son's entitlement. A hush fell as I signed the last page, making it official. The notaries affixed their seals, each thump of the stamp marking another wall between my past and the future I was building. I stood straightening my jacket, feeling taller than I had in years. Thank you, Robert, I said quietly. I choose to leave my legacy to those who deserve it, to those who know what sacrifice means. Robert smiled, offering a steady hand. Linda would be proud of you, Alan. I'll handle the filings and send Ethan the official notification. If he tries to contest it, he'll have no case. The finality settled on my shoulders, not as a weight, but as relief. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyline, the city coming alive with lights. I lingered one more moment by Linda's picture, whispering, "We did the right thing." As I left the office, the first message was already on my phone, a call from Robert, ready to send the documents that would tell Ethan once and for all that the old world was gone. Ethan sat hunched at the small table in his apartment, the single overhead bulb casting a harsh, cold light over the piles of unopened mail. His hands trembled as he slid open the thick envelope marked from the office of Robert Chen, attorney at law. He'd been dreading this moment, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, his father would come through for him one last time. He unfolded the letter, eyes scanning the legal language. It felt like ice water down his back. By the terms of the new will, you are no longer a legal heir to the Greene estate. All assets, including investments, property, and insurance, have been transferred to the Linda Greene Foundation. This decision is irrevocable and takes immediate effect. His vision blurred. He read the paragraph again, and again willing it to change, for there to be some loophole, some hidden message of hope. But every line was final, cold, implacable. Ethan let the letter fall to the table, heart hammering. His mind flashed through all the years he'd leaned on his parents, the tuition, the house, the vacations, the endless loans that had never been paid back. He'd always assumed there'd be more, that no matter what, family meant forgiveness. He'd been so sure. Now the only thing left was debt. Final notices, a pile of overdue rent, and a landlord knocking on his door twice a week. Desperation clawed at him. He grabbed his phone fingers, jabbing at his father's number. It rang and rang until finally the voicemail picked up. He tried again, nothing but the cold automated voice. Next, he dialed Jessica. The call went straight to voicemail. He left a rambling, angry message, then called again. This time, only the hollow, endless beep of a disconnected line. He looked around the room for comfort, for anything that still belonged to him. The only sounds were the buzz of the mini-fridge and the distant thumping of neighbors' televisions. There was a knock at the door. The landlord's voice was sharp. "Last warning, Ethan. I need this month's rent or you're out." He nodded, numb, barely able to speak. "I just need a little more time." When the door slammed shut, Ethan slumped over the table. He picked up the phone one last time, flinging it across the room with a hoarse animal cry. The cheap plastic shattered against the wall. Alone, he let his head fall to the table, tears soaking into the letter of rejection. He had never felt this powerless, this empty. Even anger seemed to desert him. For hours he sat there unmoving as the apartment darkened. The pile of unopened bills, the court noticed the letter from his father's silent sentinels to his collapse. As dawn broke, a cold breeze slipped under the door, carrying a scrap of paper from the hallway. Ethan barely noticed until it drifted across his foot. He picked it up now, hiring, part-time help wanted, apply in person. He stared at it, blinking away the tears, and realized this was it. His last lifeline, if he could swallow his pride. With nowhere left to turn, he folded the flyer in trembling hands, hope and humiliation warring in his chest. Tomorrow he would have to fight for a chance, no matter how small. The cold was constant, now settling into my bones as I worked the night shift at the gas station off Route 6. The neon sign flickered overhead, casting a pale light over the pumps and the cracked asphalt. This wasn't the life I had pictured for myself, not even in my darkest nightmares. My uniform smelled of gasoline, and the sleeves were too short. The older man on shift with me, Hank, barely spoke. When he did, it was in gruff, practical sentences: how to count the register, where to stash the receipts, what to do if someone tried to steal gas. I took it all in with a blank nod, ashamed of how little I knew about real work. Customers came and went in silence, most not even meeting my eyes. A few did, a group of teenagers who laughed at my name tag, an old lady who sniffed and muttered, "I thought the Greene boy moved away years ago." The worst was when a former classmate, Mark, pulled up to pump 4 in his shiny Ford. I recognized him instantly, though I wished I hadn't. Mark stepped inside for a coffee, then stopped, eyes widening. Ethan, he tried to keep his face neutral, but the pity in his gaze was unmistakable. "Wow. Hey, man. Didn't expect to see you here." I forced a brittle smile. "Yeah, well, times change." He fumbled for $1, pressed it into my palm. "Hang in there, all right," he left quickly, not looking back. After that, the shame was almost unbearable. I could still remember the days Dad used to walk me to school, telling me, "Work hard, make us proud." Now those words were a mockery. I was the town's lesson in what not to become. The hours dragged. Sometimes customers whispered, sometimes they sneered. A woman with gold bracelets and a fur collar smirked. "Didn't you used to live in that big house on Maple?" Her husband snorted. "Some fall from grace." I tried to ignore them, focused on scrubbing the coffee pot, but the humiliation burned hot and sharp. During the quietest hour of the night, I found myself alone, staring at my reflection in the glass door. I barely recognized the man I'd become, eyes hollow, skin-pale posture, slumped in defeat. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if it would be easier to just disappear, to let the cold take me, end this spiral once and for all. But even that escape felt like giving up. If there was anything left of the man my parents raised, I owed it to them to at least survive, to do the work no matter how small or humiliating. Just as I was wiping down, the counter headlights swept across the lot. A familiar car pulled up. My heart pounded. It was Dad. Alan Greene, stepping out in his pressed coat, walking toward the convenience store with the steady stride I remembered from childhood. I froze, gripping the rag in my hand. Dad walked in the bell, chiming above the door. He glanced around, eyes settling on me. For a moment we just stared at each other, two men on opposite sides of a gulf. I dug myself. "Evening," he said, his voice even. "Evening," I managed, unsure if I should feel shame or hope. He picked up a coffee, paid without another word, then turned to leave. Our eyes met once more, his steady mind brimming with everything I'd never said. I watched him go, a strange mix of relief and longing settling in my chest. Maybe somehow this wasn't quite the end. I'll never forget the look on Ethan's face when I stepped up to the counter that night. The gas station was empty, save for the two of us, the harsh glare of fluorescent lights exposing every line on his face, every tremor in his hands. For a moment he just stood there, frozen, like a child who'd been caught sneaking out after curfew. I set my coffee on the counter, watched him fumble with the register. He didn't meet my eyes at first. I could see him struggling for composure, his voice barely steady. "Evening, Dad. Evening, Ethan." I kept my tone, measured neither warm nor cold, just honest. I didn't offer pity, and I made no show of anger. We were two men stripped of everything but the truth that lay between us. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant hum of the ice machine. I remembered all the times I'd stood in this role, father, provider, the man he once looked up to. Now, I was here to offer something different, a chance, but not a handout. I looked at him carefully, seeing not the entitled young man who had once drained our resources, but someone lost, battered by life in ways I'd never intended. "How are you holding up?" I asked, my voice low. He shrugged, blinking hard. "I'm managing." The words were hollow, but there was no defensiveness, no bravado, just a rawness I'd never seen before. "I heard you're working nights." I set a business card on the counter between us. "If you want to talk, really talk, and not just ask for money, you know how to reach me." He picked up the card, staring at the embossed name and number as if it were a lifeline. For a moment he said nothing. His lips quivered, his hands tightened until his knuckles went white. I leaned in, not unkind, but firm. "You want to fix things, Ethan. Start with yourself. Don't ask for forgiveness. Earn it. Show me you can build something on your own, anything. When you're ready, I'll listen." He nodded, unable to trust his voice. For the first time I saw a crack in the armor of resentment and pride, a glimpse of humility, maybe even hope. I paid for my coffee, wished him good night, and walked out into the cold. Behind me I heard a muffled sob. I didn't turn around. Driving home, I wondered if this was the moment I'd been waiting for, not the satisfaction of revenge, but the possibility of redemption. Back inside, Ethan slumped behind the counter card, clutched in his hand, the tears he'd been holding back finally breaking free. He wept for the father he'd betrayed, for the life he'd squandered, and for the first time for the man he wanted to become. He looked down at the card, my name, my number torn between shame and longing. For the first time in years, a fragile hope flickered to life. Maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to prove himself. Not for money, not for forgiveness, but to become the man he was meant to be. The night after my father's visit, I barely slept. I lay awake in my cramped, dimly lit apartment, replaying his words over and over. Show me you can build something on your own. Anything. When you're ready, I'll listen. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of responsibility shift from my father's shoulders to mine. Rain tapped softly against the window. As dawn crept into the sky, the world washed clean but still cold. I sat at the table, clutching his business card, memories of my mother filtering in with the pale morning light. Her voice echoed in my mind, a gentle reminder: if you want forgiveness, you have to do the right thing, even when it's hard. My hands shook as I dialed Dad's number. It rang once, twice, before he answered, voice quiet and steady. Ethan, Dad. I'm ready to try. I want to work, not for money. I want to help. I want to be useful. The words tumbled out faster than I intended, raw and vulnerable. Can I volunteer with the foundation? I'll do anything. Please. There was a pause long enough for my heart to hammer against my ribs. Then, if you're serious, you'll start at the bottom just like everyone else. No special treatment. You'll report to the volunteer coordinator, not to me. Understood. I let out a shaky breath, relief and humility tangled in my chest. Yes, Dad. I understand. I'll let Sarah at the foundation know to expect your call. Show up on time. Work hard. That's all I ask. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance. We hung up. I sat there in silence, the enormity of this new path dawning on me. For once I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost, but what I might build, no matter how small. By mid-morning, I'd received an email with instructions from the Linda Greene Foundation. The message was formal brisk report at 730 A.M. to the soup kitchen on Walnut Avenue. Ask for Maria. You'll help serve breakfast to our homeless guests. I stood in front of the cracked mirror and looked at myself, disheveled, worn, but strangely determined. I put on my cleanest shirt, wiped the sleep from my eyes, and headed out into the drizzle. The soup kitchen was already bustling when I arrived. Maria, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a brisk manner, handed me an apron. You're Ethan, right, Alan's son. Doesn't matter here. Everybody's equal. Let's get to work. I found myself standing behind a long table, spooning eggs and potatoes onto paper plates for a line of men and women in worn coats. Some of them muttered thanks, some just nodded, a few barely looked up. At first I felt exposed, awkward, but as the morning wore on, something inside me softened. I started to notice small things, the relief in a man's eyes. As he sat with a hot meal, the way Maria smiled at each guest, the gratitude in their quiet thanks. My hands stopped shaking. I even caught myself smiling back at a child who shyly asked for more juice. By noon, my feet ached, but I felt lighter than I had in years. As I peeled off my apron and helped stack chairs, Maria clapped me on the shoulder. Not bad for your first day. We could use you again tomorrow. Walking out into the rain, I realized I was smiling, really smiling. For the first time, I was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant starting at the very bottom. I spent the next several weeks waking before sunrise, pulling on my worn shirt, and walking through the misty streets to the Cedar Rapids Community Center. Each morning, the kitchen was filled with the aroma of coffee, frying eggs, and the quiet, hopeful murmur of people who had little but still managed to greet the day with gratitude. On the wall above the serving line was a photograph of my mother, Linda, radiant as ever, her smile lighting up the room even now. Beneath her portrait hung a collage of letters from scholarship recipients, thank you notes, scrawled in hopeful handwriting, stories of how the Linda Greene Foundation had helped them get a second chance at life. At first, I focused on the routine stacking trays, ladling soup, pouring coffee. But day by day, the work shifted from punishment to privilege. I began to listen to the stories of the people I served. A young mother trembling with relief as she shared how the foundation had covered her daughter's hospital bills. A teenager who'd won a scholarship, now saving up for college. A man rough around the edges who admitted he wouldn't be alive if not for a warm meal and a clean cot. Each story chipped away at my self-pity and shame. I realized how much I'd taken for granted, not just money, but the love, the legacy my parents had built. For the first time, I felt proud of what our family name meant, and deeply sorry for how I'd nearly tarnished it. One morning, as I handed a plate of scrambled eggs to an older woman, she caught my wrist and looked into my eyes. "Are you Mr. Greene's boy?" she asked, voice thin but strong. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I am." Tears welled in her eyes. "Your mother and father, they saved my family. When my husband lost his job, the foundation helped us pay the rent, gave us groceries. When I heard about your mother's passing, I prayed for you all every night. My throat tightened. I managed to quiet. Thank you. She squeezed my hand before shuffling away, leaving me standing there, heart pounding with humility and gratitude. All the money I'd wasted, the chances I'd blown, they seemed so small in the shadow of real need, real generosity. Later that afternoon, Alan arrived at the center carrying a stack of mail. The volunteers gathered around as he read a letter aloud, a thank you, from the Johnson family, whose daughter was starting college because of Linda's scholarship fund. The room broke out in applause. I caught my father's eye, and for a moment I saw not just pride, but a flicker of forgiveness. As the kitchen quieted, he approached me. "You've been working hard," he said, voice steady. "I can see the difference." I nodded, still unsure of what to say. He handed me a slip of paper, an invitation written in his careful handwriting. "I'm making dinner tonight. Why don't you come home, Ethan? It's just a meal. But you'd be welcome." For a moment I could barely breathe. This was the beginning of forgiveness, of something like redemption. As I cleaned the last table and slipped the invitation into my pocket, I realized I wanted to prove myself worthy, not just to my father, but to my mother's memory and to the people our family had helped. I left the center that day with a new purpose and the first true hope I'd felt in years. That evening, I walked up the familiar path to my father's house, heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. The porch light glowed softly against the twilight, and I could see the flicker of candles inside through the dining room window. For the first time in years, I didn't hesitate before ringing the bell. Dad greeted me with a small, genuine smile. "Come on in, Ethan." His voice was gentle, maybe even lighter than I remembered. The warmth inside hit me immediately, the rich aroma of roasted chicken, the quiet strains of Mom's favorite classical music, and on the sideboard, her portrait framed in white lilies, a single candle burning beside it. Before dinner, we stood together in silence, each of us lighting a candle for Linda. The flame danced between us, reflecting in my father's eyes in the glass, covering her photo in the memories crowding my mind, her laughter in the kitchen, her arms around us, her tireless devotion. For a long moment, we simply remembered. Then Dad broke the silence, his hand resting on my shoulder. "You know, your mother always believed in second chances. She believed people could change if they truly tried." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. I wish I'd understood that sooner. He nodded. "We can't change the past, Ethan, but we can honor her by how we live now. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's letting go for her sake and for ours." We sat down at the table, passing dishes, sharing food in a way that felt both old and completely new. The conversation drifted from stories about Mom, her habit of singing off-key, her favorite pie recipe, the day she planted those lilies in the backyard, to talk of the foundation and of the future. At one point, Dad leaned forward, his eyes steady. "I forgive you, Ethan, but understand this forgiveness is only the beginning. What you do with your life, how you give back, how you treat others, that's what matters now. Make your mother proud, not just with words but with actions." I nodded, the promise heavy and sacred. "I will, Dad. I swear it. I won't let her down again. Or you." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my father smiled, really smiled, the weight of grief lifting, even if only for an evening. Peace settled between us, as gentle and complete as the candlelight on the table. After dinner, we cleared the dishes together, falling into the old rhythm, awkward at first, then natural. I looked up at Mom's photo as I wiped the table, and for a moment I could have sworn she was smiling. A quiet, proud smile that said, "You did the right thing." Standing by the window, watching the night settle over Cedar Rapids, I felt hope stir within me, a fragile but certain thing. I knew the road ahead would not be easy, that forgiveness must be earned every day, not only from my father but from myself. But for the first time, I believed it was possible. The past could not be undone, but the future was unwritten. And in that small candlelit room, I finally felt ready to begin again. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.